In the collective memory of Australia, he's an icon frozen in time. Harold Holt, the adventurous Prime Minister. Energetic, decisive, a man who projected an image of fearless capability. He was dubbed Holt 007, and for a public grappling with a nation changing faster than it could comprehend, this was the exact image of leadership they needed.
So he was basically Australia's answer to James Bond. Did he also have a car that turned into a submarine? Might have come in handy.
But this carefully constructed image was just the surface layer. To understand what really happened, you have to understand the world he was navigating. To truly grasp the events of that Sunday, you first have to breathe the air of 1967. It was the year the pressure cooker of the Cold War finally started to boil over at home. Australia wasn't just involved in the Vietnam War, the nation was tearing itself apart over it. Compulsory conscription turned university campuses into battlegrounds of ideology, and dinner tables into front lines in a generational war. This wasn't just political disagreement, it was a deep societal fracture, layered with a thick coat of paranoia. It created a climate where the unthinkable felt plausible, and where the machinery of state was primed not for transparency, but for containment.
So everyone was already wound up tighter than a watch spring.
Exactly. And it's against this backdrop of national anxiety that we arrive at Cheviot Beach. The day was Sunday, December 17th. The conditions were treacherous. A turbulent sea, strong winds, and a powerful rip current churning the water into a chaotic mess. Witnesses warned Holt not to go in. His response became one of the most infamous phrases in Australian history. He said, "I know this beach like the back of my hand." It was a statement of supreme, unshakable confidence.
I know this beach like the back of my hand. Well, I suppose he got to know the seabed pretty intimately too.
One moment he was there, a familiar figure against the foam. The next, the ocean simply reclaimed the space where he had been. He didn't cry out, he didn't struggle, he was just erased. On the shore, a stunned silence fell, the kind of absolute quiet that happens in the heart of a chaotic noise. The local SCUBA divers who raced to the scene were some of the most experienced in the country, but experience meant nothing to the sea that day. Descending into the water, they entered a world of violent, senseless brown. The rip current didn't just pull, it tore at them, a physical force that punished any attempt at control. It was a complete sensory deprivation chamber, a brutal rejection of their rescue attempt. The ocean wasn't just hiding a body, it was actively resisting the search. On paper, the explanation is simple: a tragic accident, a confident man who underestimated the power of nature. The case, it seemed, was closed. For decades, this was where the story ended, a simple, tragic footnote in history, filed under Act of God. A story everyone could agree on. But hidden within the archives, another story was waiting. One found not in eyewitness accounts from the beach, but in the clinical, unforgiving text of a doctor's notes. The moment you open Harold Holt's medical file, the legend of Holt 007 doesn't just crumble, it evaporates. Holt was suffering from a severe cervical disc problem. This wasn't just a stiff neck, it caused debilitating pain and significant weakness in his shoulder and right arm. To manage this, he was on a sophisticated cocktail of morphine and aspirin.
Hang on, morphine? He was on morphine and went swimming in a rip current? Are you serious?
A key witness, Marjorie Gillespie, was with him on the beach. Her direct testimony of his final moments is the most chilling piece of evidence from that day.
It was like a leaf being blown away, so fast and final.
This is a world away from the vigorous leader of public perception. We have a man on heavy pain medication with compromised motor control attempting to swim in a sea state that would challenge an Olympian.
That's not an accident. That's a catastrophic miscalculation.
And here, the official story encounters its first critical failure. The one man who could have provided a definitive assessment of Holt's physical state that day, his orthopedic surgeon, Dr. John Cloak, was never formally interviewed by any investigating authority.
Wait, what? They didn't talk to his doctor? At all? How is that even possible?
It's not an oversight, it's an erasure. And it's here, in this deliberate omission, that the story of a simple drowning transforms into something else entirely. Because while the public was being told this was a tragic swimming accident, the national security apparatus was treating it as a major security incident from the very first hour. At approximately 2 p.m. that afternoon, just 90 minutes after Holt vanished, his son Nicholas was notified. But the call didn't come from the Victoria Police. It came from Commander Ronald Titcomb, a senior officer in Naval Intelligence.
Right, that's a new one on me. Since when does Naval Intelligence handle missing person reports? I've got to ask our legends in the comments. Has anyone ever heard of that happening? Fill us in.
Precisely. This intervention is extraordinary. The military security apparatus immediately bypassed civil police protocol and classified the Prime Minister's disappearance as a matter of national security. This single detail reframes everything. If this was just a man who drowned, why was the military's intelligence wing taking point? What protocol had been triggered?
It means they weren't thinking drowning. They were thinking something else.
And that leads to the most damning failure in the timeline. As the sun began to set over Victoria, casting long shadows across a beach now swarming with reporters and powerless officials, the window for any meaningful recovery was slamming shut. The critical hours ticked by, and yet the specialist Navy dive team, the only unit truly equipped for these impossible conditions, was nowhere to be seen. From the moment Naval Intelligence was alerted to the moment the elite divers were finally operational represents a 10-hour void, an operational black hole where decisive action should have been. For the leader of a nation, in a moment of supreme crisis, the system did not respond. It froze.
A 10-hour delay. Glad to see they approached the missing head of government situation with a real sense of urgency.
Lieutenant Commander Phil Hawke, the leader of that dive team, was unequivocal in his assessment. He stated that any possibility of finding the Prime Minister was lost Sunday night. The operation was crippled by jurisdictional chaos, a power struggle between state police and federal military resources. It was doomed not by the ocean, but by systemic dysfunction. A massive search operation was eventually launched. Ships, aircraft, hundreds of personnel. But they found nothing. No body, not a shred of clothing, not a single piece of physical evidence. Just the things he'd left on the beach. The search that found nothing led to the investigation that avoided its own evidence. If you find this exploration of a house system's fail as fascinating as we do, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You're not going to want to miss what we uncover next. The Victoria Police, led by Detective Jack Ford, submitted their report in January 1968. The conclusion? Accidental drowning. But this investigation was built on a foundation of deliberate omission. By choosing not to interview Dr. John Cloak, they reached a conclusion while actively avoiding the one piece of testimony that could have either confirmed or completely contradicted it.
It's like investigating a car crash, but making a point not to talk to the mechanic who just serviced the brakes. You might miss a key detail.
But perhaps the most accurate verdict on Holt's state of mind didn't come from any official report. It came from his wife, Zara. Her assessment was brutally simple.
He'd had it.
But the final, most definitive act of institutional closure happened not on a beach, but in the quiet, carpeted offices of Canberra. Faced with a police report that was structurally flawed, the Commonwealth government made a singular, politically calculated decision. They fundamentally refused to hold a formal, governmental inquiry into the death of the sitting Prime Minister. This wasn't a procedural oversight. It was a deliberate choice to slam the door on any further questions. This decision was the master switch that shut down the entire investigative machine. The reason this refusal mattered is simple.
A formal inquiry would have meant testimony under oath, compulsory examination of medical records, and cross-examination of Naval Command. It would have forced Dr. Cloak to testify. It would have forced the Navy to explain the 10-hour delay. It would have forced the security establishment to explain why naval intelligence was involved at all.
So they didn't ask the questions because they knew they wouldn't like the answers.
The decision prioritized a smooth political succession over forensic transparency. Decades passed. In 2005, a coroner's inquiry was finally held, and it formally confirmed the accidental drowning theory, dismissing all other questions as fanciful. But it operated in the exact same informational vacuum as the 1968 investigation. The system had simply ossified around its own conclusions. Which brings us to the real heart of this mystery. The available evidence strongly suggests a tragic preventable accident. A physically compromised man, under the influence of powerful painkillers, made a fatal error in judgment. This is a tragedy, but it isn't a mystery. The real mystery is systemic. It's the answer to a different question. Why did the Australian bureaucracy choose narrative control over forensic truth? Let's lay out the architecture of that choice. You have the intervention of naval intelligence, treating a missing person like a state secret from the first hour. You have the inexplicable 10-hour delay, a black hole of inaction where an elite recovery team should have been. You have the deliberate decision to never interview the one doctor who could speak to the Prime Minister's true physical state. And finally, you have the political masterstroke, the outright refusal to hold a formal inquiry, the one mechanism that could have compelled the truth. These are not four separate mistakes. They are the four walls of a fortress built by the bureaucracy to protect itself. The mystery of Harold Holt is not what happened to him. The mystery is why the Australian system was structured to ensure we would never fully know. The very institutions we trust to find the truth were, in this case, engineered to prevent the investigation itself. This isn't a conspiracy, it's bureaucracy, the ordinary grinding machinery of institutional self-protection operating at the highest level of power.
Right, so that's the case file. Another story where the cover-up is more interesting than the crime. There's always another file, always another layer to peel back. If you want to be there when we open the next one, make sure you join the legends on this journey.
The case of Harold Holt shows how an official narrative can be constructed to provide simple answers, even if it leaves the biggest questions unanswered. But what happens when the scene of the mystery itself defies all logic? In our next case file, we investigate the Kaz 2, a yacht found drifting in the Coral Sea, completely undamaged, with the table set for dinner, but with its crew of 3 expert sailors having vanished without a trace.
So another case where the official story asks you to believe that 3 seasoned sailors all suddenly forgot how to sail at the exact same time. Sounds familiar?